Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again. Um, got a question about ICE again and about guest access and how you can secure your guest access with Cisco Identity Services. So there are technically three ways to do it, and we're going to go over this, and I'm going to go from easy to hard. Well, none of these methods are traditionally hard, but let's say in terms of implementation, one's an easy implementation, one's a little medium implementation, and then the other one's like the hardest implementation, even though it's fairly easy to configure. So let's get to the whiteboard here, and I always start with my titles. So let's say guest access. Now, what ICE can do is a lot of medical centers, retail environments, stuff like that. They like to give guest access to users, right? Because if nowadays, if you're not giving guest access, pretty much pointless, right? People won't really visit your store. Take Starbucks, for instance. So the thing about guest access, though, now from a design perspective, I'm going to do another side quest. From a design perspective, your guest network should not commingle with your production network. I see a lot of people doing that. They have a guest SSID, but it goes through, technically the underlay is your production network. If you want to be super secure, there's two ways of doing this. There is either having a completely separate guest wireless. You're just going to use ICE for, and let me draw this out here. You'll have two different networks. You're going to have, I'm going to say this is the production side, production, and then we're going to say this is the guest side, guest. Now, guest has its own firewalls, own internet pipeline, etc. Say that's a router there. Production has its own firewalls, internet router. Now, in the middle, you can either go through the firewall to get here, or you can have another firewall here between production and guests. And what will happen is users on this side, when they go to authenticate with ICE, let's say we put ICE over here. All right. They will authenticate to an AP. AP will send that radius request through this firewall. It will get to ICE. ICE will then say, okay, I'm going to allow that to go through. I should have drew an AP right here. And then once they go through, they'll get internet access and go through the firewall through the internet. That's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is this technique called, it's going to be called guest anchoring. All right, a guest anchor. And what that basically is, in the Cisco world, you have two WLC, you have your main WLC, and then you have a foreign WLC. But this foreign WLC is technically a firewall in between it. And then there's tunneling between these two. So now, when users on this side, they connect to this foreign WLC, gets sent to ICE, right? Once they get authorized, their traffic is actually tunneled from the primary WLC, and we'll just do a tunnel here, to the foreign WLC, and then it pops out the firewall, goes to internet access here. So those are two ways of doing it, right? Now, I've seen both. I've seen people do separation of guest to production networks, completely separate. No way this thing is going to go through your production network. You don't have to worry about QoS for guests to make sure it's not overutilizing the underlay. And then I've seen the guest anchor technique, which is basically, hey, everybody's going to pop out to a foreign WLC, and that's going to go behind a firewall, and then that traffic's just going to go out to the internet. So those are the two ways of doing that. So now, what are the three ways of doing guest access in ICE? So there's three ways here. I'll just guess. Access. There is hotspot. Now this is the easiest one. So the only thing that hotspot is they see a page and there's a little button that says click here, right? You probably see this in hotels. You probably see this in Starbucks. It's a UAP that pops up and say, hey, clicking this, you agree to the UAP and then you'll get internet access. Now, what they're going to be authorized is just strictly regular web, HTTPS, and maybe DNS, because your DNS guest users should not be resolving IP to FQ or FQDN to IP addresses in your local DNS server. Have them go out to Google or something like that. This is the easiest one to implement because it's just a click and go. The next method is called self-registration. So what is this? This is users get to a page and they pretty much need to create their own account. So the users create their own account here. Account. Now, one of the requirements here is ICE will need to know your SMTP server because it's going to email that information to them, right? It'll show it on the screen, but then it will email that information to them. And if you don't have your SMTP server set up in ICE, some people click too fast and then they skip past the username and password, and now they can't get on their on the guest network. And that's if you're going to do it with self-registration. Now, the difficulty of this is it's fairly easy, but still users have to go through the whole self-registration stuff, right? They have to know, hey, I got to fill out this information. I got to look at my email address. And then when I get the username and password, I get on. The next one is sponsored. Now, this is the same thing. They'll go to a page, but it will ask them for a username and password already, right? They don't get to create this. Now, this one is the most secure option. So I'm gonna say most secure and then least secure for hotspot. And then this is in the middle, right? The downside of sponsored guests is someone has to sponsor the user. Somebody has to create the account and then give it to the user or email the user their account information before they come in. So from a con perspective, this is administrative overhead. Admin overhead. Somebody has to do this. Now, from a security standpoint, if someone does get this account, you can easily tell who created this account for this user. And you can tell, hey, you created an account for this user. Why? The admin overhead, though, is the issue. If I have to create an account and then I have to sponsor somebody, I have to get all that done before the person comes in. People get busy. There's things that catch on fire in the office and they're busy working on putting out that fire. They forget to create a bunch of accounts. And then you have 15 people like, I can't get on Wi-Fi. But this one is the most secure. And a lot of people that I've seen, for the most part, because I know that's the next question that's going to be asked, what do you see the most, is hotspot and sponsored. Because they either go from, hey, we want to control it completely, or just let people click through and get on the internet, no problem. Now, in my personal opinion, I would lose hotspot if you would use the technique of separating guest access or having that, guest anchor, that anchor WLC, and you just want to implement wireless for guests super fast and you don't really care. Sponsored is just for people who want to be more secure. You can still have that separation of, production versus guest network. You can still have that, but you just want to be more secure in terms of who can get on guests. Because with hotspot, anybody can get on your guests, right? All I got to do is accept the UAP and then click through. And now someone could be, sitting in the parking lot, just siphoning off your internet just cause. Most people don't care too much about that, especially if they have a separate internet pipe coming in and it might be like a 2 meg pipe. But if you care about it, I probably wouldn't go hotspot right out the gate. If you want to just implement something real fast, go with hotspot. If you want secure guests, go with either sponsored guests or self-registration. Remember, self-registration requires users to actually be involved in the guest process. And depending on the capabilities of the users, I've seen where people get confused at the self-registration on what to do. Now for sponsored, that's the, again, biggest headache here is going to be administrative overhead, but it's more secure and it's no involvement from the user. All you do is give them their username and password. They click on the SSID. It comes up, says put your username and password in. You put it in, bam, you're on the internet. So for those people, again, that want the most secure option for guests and don't mind the administrative overhead, go with sponsored guests. For people who really don't care and they want ease of implementation and they don't want to have a bunch of a bad user experience or CX experience, go with hotspot. For people that want to go in between and they don't care if the user has to create their own accounts, then go with self-registration. And ICE could do all of these, right? And if you want something like this in your environment here, I'm going to leave some descriptions and link, and I'm going to leave some links in the description below. Basically, it's going to either, you want to do this right now, and you want to have a discovery call. There's a link in there in the description below. We can contact me, and we'll have a talk, see what you're trying to do, and see how we can implement this in your environment. If you're not sure if you're ready for ICE, there's going to be another link in the description to take a NAC readiness score. This is going to be a questionnaire or a survey, basically, that's going to ask you a couple questions to see if you're even ready to implement ICE in your environment. Some people aren't. Some people need ICE immediately based on the questions, and some people are, they're running ICE perfectly fine. So if you're not sure if you need ICE, there's going to be a link in the description for that. Once again, this is Don from Padlock Technologies talking about guest access via Cisco Identity Services, the 3 types of guest access you can provide from a authentication authorization standpoint, what's the least secure but easy to implement, and what's the most secure and quote unquote harder to implement. If you are looking to get this done, I'm going to repeat this again. There's going to be links in the description to get in contact with me so we can start talking about how to implement this in your environment. Hopefully this video was informative. Thank you and have a nice day.